Happy New Year! It's 2025, and it's time for us to reflect on the year just past and what may lie ahead for the year 2025. That's right, it's time for the prediction show on this week's Digital Restaurant. Happy Monday. Happy New Year, Meredith. How are you?
That's right. Happy New Year. Very good. How are you?
Feels unusual for us to be speaking so late into the new year, don't you think? Holidays were good. Holidays good for you. They're quiet for me, which was nice.
Yeah, no, all good around here. Excellent.
Good stuff. We don't do the typical episode on the first part of the year because we like to look into our crystal ball once again and to reflect upon what we thought might come about in 2024, and while also giving a few views as to where we think 2025 is going to take us. No news this week, folks. We're going to give you some forecasts as to where things are headed. What do you think to that, Meredith? Good idea?
Sounds great. I first love to hear how'd we do last year?
Yeah. Okay, let's go through them. The first one was all around consolidation. I think we were saying there's going to be a lot more consolidation as we get into 2024, whether that be on the restaurant side or the technology side. How do you think we did with
I think consolidation absolutely continued on the technology side.
Yeah, I think so. On the technology side, I think there was a recognition that things need to get easier, right? But there's just so many choices. The maps, which we see through the course of the year, are for of all the different technologies out there, continue to get incredibly full. I think they've got fuller over the last few years than at any other point. And so, in that sense, being able to have offerings that are clear from the standpoint of just having one provider to provide in numerous levels of services, I think is appealing to the restaurant owners out there that are struggling with the procurement challenges. Again, I think there's still some question marks for me as to how true some of these consolidations are from the technology standpoint, but I think we're on the right journey.
Now, do we get credit for Par buying Delegate, even though they announced it on the 2nd of January?
I think we put that in the newsletter in December. So yes, I,
I
I
know.
think I think we're going to take that one.
I'm pretty sure they've been working on it for more than just January.
Not that we knew. There's no insider information there.
No, but
Um,
yeah, consolidation definitely continued.
the second one we had was about marketplaces and that they were going to continue to invest and put time into multiple verticals outside of restaurants. I think that's a slam dunk, don't you?
I think it's a slam dunk, certainly for DoorDash. I think Uber, they differentiated a little. Not that Uber hasn't gone into new verticals, but DoorDash has been very clear that they are local commerce, and that's what they're all about. Whereas Uber has been very clear that they're about mobility. Now, those two things obviously intersect in the movement of local goods, but as Uber has evolved their business, they've gone, I think, toward things with a mobility lens, whereas DoorDash has gone toward things with more of a local commerce lens.
Yep, agreed. All right, 2 out of 2, we're doing well. The third one was all about tip fatigue. As we think about where we were this time last year, a lot of folks were starting to see that the tip window would appear in every walk of life at various different coffee shops to restaurants to shops. You'd have to give a tip for everything. And with the inflationary impact of 23 and in 2024, that fatigue would lead to operators wanting to invest in more automation, more process efficiency. What do you think? I think so, right? I think we've seen that come about where we've seen more and more operators now starting to say, look, we've got to be able to find ways to be able to reduce the cost of labor in our business to be able to make room for that, but also to recognize that consumers are visiting perhaps a little less because of their own reluctance to spend out as much as they are, not only because of the cost of products, the cost of labor, but now also this tipping thing.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And where it has been the most true this year is in the implementation of kiosks in restaurants, which, of course, is just like an absolutely fascinating combination. We're going to give you the option to tip a person who is no longer even visible because this computer is taking your order.
Yeah, absolutely. The two big investments last year, of course, drive-through AI and the kiosks, I think, were the two big winners from a tech standpoint. Next one, digital hospitality was going to become more of a priority in the off-premise channel. I don't know. I think this might be a miss. I don't know. It feels like we've made some little steps forward in certain areas. Certainly the kiosks, in one sense, you could argue, are aiding in that regard because they are certainly helping from the hospitality angle of speed and convenience. But in other instances, I'm not sure we're still feeling like it's being treated with the same level of white glove service as you might get when you're face to
Mm.
face with someone.
Yeah, I don't know. I certainly, as a consumer, have felt a dramatic improvement in the number of errors in my deliveries coming to me. And I have felt also an increase in communication frequency from the brands. Your order's been received, your order is in transit, that kind of thing. So it at least feels a little bit more hospitable as a consumer. And I think that means the brands are putting effort toward it.
Oh, well, I don't know. I mean, look, Price Waterhouse are not auditing us this year. And so therefore, I think we can give ourselves a half a point. What do you think?
All right. I'll take it.
Everyone out there, we've still got work to do. Let's put it that way. We've still got work to do to truly become hospitable. All right, the last one we had was, and this obviously went back to the last chapter of the path to digital maturity, where we said at some point on that kind of path, restaurants are going to have to make a choice. They either have to embrace the journey to truly 100% digital, or perhaps they should actually embrace the idea of experiential dining. And so we put that challenge out there to the kind of casual dining segment, if you recall, about how can you improve the experience for those kind of on-premise settings? What do you think? Have you eaten out at many places where the experiential dining has gone up a level?
I have not seen a lot of that, but my favorite book of the year is a book called Irreplaceable. It is a book by Kevin Kelly. He's an architect, and it is all about making places that people want to be, all kinds of places, things like malls and grocery stores, and including restaurants. When I think of the kind of work that he is doing and the brands that he is working with, I think they absolutely are getting more experiential. And what we're seeing is that those experiential brands are outperforming the ones that aren't as experiential. Did everyone rush out and do it? Certainly not, especially casual dining, which was a bit of a bloodbath this year. But I think we're starting to see glimmers.
Absolutely. All right. So what are we saying? Yes, no, half a point for that one?
I'll give it half a point.
All right, 4 out of 5, Meredith. That's pretty good. We're pretty good at this. Congratulations, us. All right, let's turn our attention to 2025. I guess we've been emboldened by our success there to not just give you 5 predictions, but 8 this year.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. So who knows how this is going to work out. But let's start with the first one. The first one perhaps isn't hugely bold. Panera Bread will go public this year. Now, I don't know whether you remember, back in May of 2023, the company announced leadership changes, and part of some of that logic was to think about maybe leading towards more of a public offering. So what is it about 2025 that you think is going to lend itself nicely for maybe Panera and maybe others to start thinking about going public? Of course, a lot of this is about capital raising and the version of cost of capital versus cost of debt and the ability to expand. What thoughts do you have? You've been in this space for a while to give us your perspectives as to why perhaps Panera and others might be thinking about it.
Yeah, you always want to have what they call a good window. They say the window is open, the window is closed for IPOs. And I think the window is probably opening if the market stays good, multiples stay healthy. That's always a good time to go public. But you also have to believe that's going to carry on for some time, because whoever it is that's taking the company public will probably remain an owner for some period of time, right? So they don't want to see a big boom splat, but want to see a very healthy IPO and then continued growth thereafter. So what does that require? That requires EPS growth, and that requires at least a constant multiple, if not an expanding one. And I think as some of the challenges that we've experienced over the last few years start to moderate, as businesses adjust to them, we should start to see EPS growth on a pretty consistent basis. And then you should see pretty healthy multiples, hopefully, knock wood, if the market stays positive, as it has done since the election.
And from an interest rate perspective, how does that play into this as well? Is the cost of debt a factor as companies are thinking about this?
That's a great question. I think the cost of debt typically is a factor in just how investors allocate their money. But the fact that the market continues to be pretty high tells me that the interest rates have not impacted the market too much.
All right. We'll keep an eye out for it. Prediction 2, you'll recall when we wrote our first book, we looked outside the US, and one of the most fascinating companies that we looked at was Meituan out of China. Now, China generally has been quite advanced when it comes to e-commerce. If you look at the e-commerce proportion of transactions across China, it's something like 50% of all retail transactions are e-commerce. Compare that to the US last year, something like 16%. So this is a huge organization. In the book, we talked about them being this conglomerate of different services, almost like the Fandango.com, the Expedia, not just the DoorDash kind of experience. And all of that being worked together through the WeChat interface and being able to have payment all interconnected through it. Well, Meituan, we are suggesting, is going to take more time outside of China. They announced only recently about their entrance into Saudi Arabia, which I think is going to be interesting for that particular market because the Middle East is there's this Vision 2030 initiative in Saudi Arabia. They've given companies coming in, I think, something like a 30-year corporate income tax exemption if they relocate regional headquarters to Riyadh. So there's certainly some federal elements there, which are probably drawing some favorable reasons as to why Saudi. But you've got in those environments places like Jahez, and they've got Delivery Heroes, Hunger Station as the prevalent marketplaces. So Meituan coming in there with all that robust operational experience and the technology that they've been able to build out in China could really raise some very significant competitive threat, certainly initially in Saudi and then more in the Middle East region. But my thinking here is that if they succeed there, then why wouldn't they continue on? We've seen, of course, with DoorDash and Uber Eats, just the rise of globalization for those companies as they've tried to do what they've done. But maybe DoorDash and Uber, who, of course, have perhaps, it's fair to say, become the true duopoly in the US, are going to face some global challenges if Meituan start to come up against them. What do you think?
I think there will definitely be a few global players who rise, and whether that's because they're entering new markets like Meituan is doing here, or because they're making acquisitions, which I expect we will see more of, you're going to end up with a couple dominant global players.
We shall see. All right, let's go to the third one. We've got a little cuisine heavy here. One of my favorite takeaways in England was a good old curry, Meredith. Good old korma. We're thinking Indian food's going to become more prevalent this year, especially under the delivery channel, because it is so great for delivery purposes. It's something very easy to travel. It's very easy to warm up. When we look through the numbers, in December 2024, there were something like 8,500 Indian restaurants, I think, across the country, which is something like a 9% increase on the year prior to that. And about 80% of those were single owner operations, so rather independent. I know you've been looking into a little bit of the chain story here. Is there a big chain play? But what do you think? Do you think, firstly, the food, is that going to become something which we're going to see more of? We know ethnic food has become something that's been really rich when it comes to delivery. But do you see that's going to be something for the US market and maybe a chain emerging more dominantly?
Yeah, I do. Will we see the winning chain this year in 2025? I'm not sure. But as we talked about in the first book, in the chapter Our Tastes Are Changing, we are becoming a more global nation with a lot more people who came from somewhere else and brought their cuisine traditions with them. And as a result, whether you are an immigrant or you were born here, your tastes are getting more sophisticated. And all Americans are getting more interested in a wide variety of cuisine types. I believe that will both impact the existing big chains and how they do their innovation, but it will also potentially give rise to additional chains, similar to what the popularity of Mediterranean did with chains like Cava and regional chains like Tzatziki's and Luna Grill. Now, in Indian food, it has the extra special thing here of being highly deliverable. So that makes it really interesting because they have for a long time as independent owner operators had their own little delivery fleet. And I think part of the reason that maybe they weren't as popular on the platforms initially, similar with Chinese food, is that they had already solved delivery in a different way and Americans were used to ordering direct from the restaurant and having it delivered. But a couple of things are happening. One, as the delivery companies are becoming much more sophisticated, maybe it makes sense to use them instead of having your own fleet. Certainly, as some of these restaurant chains start to become more chain-like and more professional and less independent owner-operator, they're more likely to use the big delivery guys. There are, that I could find, about 3 or 4 different chains out there today. There's a place called Nonstop that has 3 locations in Atlanta, a place called Roti with 22 locations, primarily in Chicago and DC, and a place called Honest, which I had never heard of, that has 42 locations in the US, came out of India directly and is a vegetarian restaurant. That one's super interesting. So I think we will see more and more of that. Roti in particular has a great online ordering experience powered by Thanks. That tells me that they're designing themselves as a little bit more of a modern brand in keeping with all of the other restaurants out there using the same kind of tools and approaches that they do.
You're getting me hungry. We better move on. My goodness, this is my favorite Friday night food. All right, let's talk about the next one. Vision AI playing a bigger role in the chargeback space and the value drain that we know is caused by the chargeback dispute process. This is happening when perhaps a delivery transaction hasn't gone and the customer is disputing that an item has been completely left off the order, or indeed that something it was wrong with it. And that's where this kind of question of blame starts. Is it the marketplace? Is it the driver? Is it the restaurant? Or is the customer perhaps being a little bit naughty and say they didn't receive the thing that actually they did? Maybe Vision AI, Meredith, can play a role here, right? It's been an ongoing task. I think a lot of the time, the technology and the folks that are working this right now are actually trying to bring data to the table just because it's such a administrative burden. But if you could imagine a camera or two hanging above some of these things to be able to actually demonstrate proof that the package indeed was correct before it leaves the restaurant, that certainly could perhaps help this particular challenge. What do you think? Have you seen any players starting doing anything in this area? Do you think this is going to be something that comes to life?
Yeah, there have been a number of startups who've been working on Vision AI, and I think it can impact a lot of different areas in the restaurant. I think it's very useful. I think the technology is finally getting far enough along that it can actually be deployed to great success on many fronts. Will it actually solve the chargeback challenge? I don't know. As we said in the book, when you have all these different parties and a server who's employed by no one really, there's just so much opportunity for this. And certainly Vision AI can fix some of it by proving what was in the bag, but I doubt whether it can fix all of it.
If it can help, then that's a good thing. There's certainly other areas, of course, like you say, there's a company called Orbograph out there that has this thing called OrbNet Forensic AI that leverages the image analysis and machine learning to detect fraud in financial documents. And so there are things like that that just apply just to generally running a business that I think are going to come to life as well. But we shall see. All right, let's talk about the next one. Prediction 5, regulatory approvals will become easier, or at least for those companies trying to develop more drone technology and the automated vehicles in this space. And I think therefore, I guess the prediction here is that we're going to see perhaps less of these e-commerce orientated orders being fulfilled by non-gig work, certainly relative to previous years.
I think if you had asked me this question yesterday, I would have said 100%, absolutely, no question. This is a no-brainer given Tesla and their involvement with the new administration. After the drone hit the fire plane in LA last night, I don't know. I feel a little bit more like maybe we need to take a pause on this and figure out what we're allowing drones to do. Now, of course, that wasn't a delivery drone, that was a consumer drone, but it does tell you that it's not without risk to have all these things up in the sky.
Yeah, look, I think it was May last year, the FAA signed, I think it was the Beyond Visual Line of Sight drone operation order or something, and that was enabling drone delivery services to operate more freely and efficiently across the country. We know Amazon have had their Prime Air approval from the FAA as well. We know Walmart are working with Wing. So there's momentum in this space, and I think that's something to be excited about. I think the piece that we're going to lend ourselves to as we start to see this become more prevalent is a little bit like what we've seen with some of the providers out there that help you choose which delivery fleet to utilize, whether it be using the DoorDash driver or your own private fleet. I wonder whether we're going to get to a stage where now it's going to be able to say, actually, for this particular delivery, it makes sense for us to use a Coco robotics device. And for this other one over here, it actually makes sense for a driver. It's going to be in those kind of areas where we're going to have to get some better intelligence as to what the right solution is when, and whether restaurants can even accommodate having that variety of delivery options. Okay, next one. This one is around augmented reality. Meredith, have you got some of Meta's Ray-Bans yet?
I don't, but of course Scott does,
And?
and he absolutely loves them. Loves them.
And what does he do with them?
What does he do with them? First of all, he protects his very light eyes, as I'm sure you can identify with. So he's got the sunglass type. He does a lot of phone calls with them, which he likes because they're hands-free but not ear blocking, so you can still be safe. He also will snap photos of things as we're out and about and doing things. And then finally, he has started chatting with them, just asking random stuff, because you can talk to it now like you would type interface with ChatGPT, except you're talking to your sunglasses.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting space. Of course, Apple had their Vision Pro, which was very expensive, hasn't really become as dominant as perhaps they initially had hoped, but I bet they'll come out with the second model this year. And of course, at CES this month, companies have been showcasing all sorts of smart glasses for everyday wear and offering new kind of functionality that's providing real-time information and, of course, more AI assistance. And I think as we see the evolvement of what's happening with companies like NVIDIA and quantum computing, the ability to provide real-time AI support to the stimuli of what you're seeing in front of you perhaps is going to enable us to provide reminders on certain tasks that need to be done, perhaps recommendations. And so, as I was thinking about this from the standpoint of restaurant, maybe we could help with inventory counting, right? Maybe you can help the consumer with regards to being able to translate the menu to their language of choice, or maybe even go to the angle of being able to provide better levels of recommendations based on their diet preferences and allergies and things like that. So I think this is going to be something that perhaps doesn't emerge fully, of course, in 2025, but it wouldn't surprise me for us to be talking about some pretty exciting new startups that are developing maybe software to be sitting on these platforms to help the restaurant industry do what they do better by using the stimuli of what it's recording in front of them relative to what the operator is trying to do themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's go to the next one. We've got two more. My goodness, we're doing well. All right, I'm confident. I think we might get 80% again. Social commerce is going to rise in marketing budget allocation in. So what do we mean by social commerce? And of course, now with marketing budgets increasingly stretched, why is social commerce going to be important?
Yes. Question one, what the heck is social commerce? And I think by that we mean the ability to engage directly with, say, something in Instagram or Facebook and have that lead directly to an e-commerce order. I think it will absolutely grow. There's a huge amount to be said just for brand building marketing that's not action oriented, that just lets you know what the brand is all about. But many times, the quicker you can get the impetus related to the action, the more likely the action is to take place.
Yeah, absolutely. The recent stats I was looking at last year were showing that the average person now spends something like 144 minutes per day on social media. You think then about some of the analysis attributed to how much people trust things like online reviews and recommendations on social media. 88%, that same study was telling me, that said people are going to trust their recommendations from those people on their social networks. And so if the survey went on to say 50% of diners claim that social media can influence their restaurant choices. And so for me, I wonder whether there's something here about just trying to compare the costs, right? When you're thinking about, you've only got a very limited amount. What do we say usually, Meredith? What, 3 to 6% typically being dedicated to marketing for restaurants?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that 3 to 6%, should that include the advertising you add on to your commissions on a marketplace? When you think about the fact that you should pay some of that budget towards things like Google, when you think about the traditional forms of media, when you think about PR, direct mail, it becomes a very thin budget very quickly. And so I hope where we're heading is to a place where the analytics of each marketing channel is done in such a way to really be able to demonstrate its efficacy. Because if you were to look at a Facebook ad, I've seen something like 25 to 30 cents per click, for example, and you were to compare that relative to the price you might pay for a DoorDash advert, you start to say, what is my best vehicle here? And if you can get better at these elements of social commerce, then I think you're ultimately going to get a better efficiency of your marketing spend.
Mm-hmm.
All right, last one up. Oh, you love a good acquisition speculation story. This one, I've seen this talked about a little bit, and I know it was Muse 2021 from DoorDash, I think at the time, we're talking about acquiring Instacart. Of course, Uber now have their partnership with Instacart, but we're saying one of those two may well acquire them this year. What do you think?
I think it's very likely as these guys get into other verticals, the best way to get into another vertical is to go with somebody who's already there, right? You can either try to build the business or you can buy it. And I don't know that it makes sense for Instacart to exist on a standalone basis in an environment where the two big guys are going into multiple verticals. So you put together like the desire to get into the vertical with the desire to maybe not hang out as a standalone company, and
yeah,
acquisition seamless, very likely.
Well, DoorDash's market cap, I think, sits around 72 billion. I think Uber's around 137, and Instacart, I think, is much lower than the 39 billion it was back in 2021. So there's certainly some opportunity there from that angle. And as you say, grocery is continuing to find levels of growth in this space. So it's an exciting spot, and clearly it's an area where the big guys want to operate in. So it wouldn't surprise me that we see some further speculation on this space through the course of the year. We shall see. We would love to get your thoughts on 2025. What do you think are going to be the big trends, the things that are coming about in the months ahead? Which one of you agree with our predictions? Either all of them? Which ones do you disagree with? Would love to know. Put your comments below. But Happy New Year to you all. Thank you for listening. And until next time, see you then. The Digital Restaurant Podcast is available for you to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Watch us, rate us, and subscribe to The Digital Restaurant on YouTube, and follow along on all our social media digital restaurant channels. Thanks for listening.